To build muscle after 50 effectively, focus on your post-workout nutrition. Choosing the right supplements can make a huge difference. Instead of using random supplements, we're combining specific ones that work together to enhance muscle growth through different pathways in the body. We've learned a lot from scientific research, allowing us to improve our muscle building techniques. MTOR is important for muscle growth, but it needs to be controlled to avoid unwanted effects like inflammation. We'll discuss the compounds and ingredients that can help maximize your workouts. Let's dive in and make the most of this knowledge. First, I'm going to lay out a list of compounds and ingredients. Next, I'll explain the why, the where, and the how. Your muscle after 50 post-workout components are L-Leucine, Whey-Protein, omega-3s, glucose, fructose, salt, caffeine, creatine, L-Carnitine, L-Leucine. The most essential amino acid for building muscle is leucine, simply because it's the most anabolic amino acid there is. Leucine activates the anabolic pathway in the human body called MTOR. MTOR is like a switch that flips on muscle building machinery, and when activated, it triggers and increases in the creation of new skeletal muscle tissue, otherwise known as protein synthesis. Leucine provides the building blocks for protein synthesis and plays a critical role in upregulating the process. Even when there are enough amino acids available to provide the building materials for new muscle, adding additional leucine boosts protein synthesis rates. But why would you want to add additional leucine to your post-workout shake if your whey protein already has leucine in it? Good question. Leucine is a free-form supplement that gets absorbed faster than when the amino acid is part of a whole protein. Although whey protein is fast digesting, it can take hours for the leucine to be extracted from the whey and put into circulation. As a result, leucine concentrations in the blood never gets the opportunity to spike to high levels. Taking additional leucine solves that problem. Omega-3s. In nearly all situations, when you spike insulin, you want to keep your fat super low because insulin spikes open up the cell doorway to allow for nutrients, which is excellent for protein and carbs, but not so good for fats. If you enable fats to be absorbed at this most sensitive time, they will most likely go towards fat storage. But in this situation, I recommend taking in a small amount of high-quality omega-3s because they dramatically increase protein synthesis. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Science found that adding a couple of grams of omega-3s to post-workout nutrition ended up increasing protein synthesis by 50% through the P70S6K pathway. In layman's terms, adding omega-3s to the equation, the metabolic switch for building muscle was switched on even more. However, it only works in the presence of amino acids, namely leucine. So a small amount of omega-3s and a good amount of lean protein with leucine equaled a 50% increase in protein synthesis process, which meant that more protein went towards building more muscle. Carbohydrates. Included in this post-workout protocol, we're going to combine salt, glucose, fructose, and caffeine, along with our omega-3s, additional leucine, and whey. Here's why. We have different shuttle buses that transport carbohydrates to different parts of the body. Glucose is absorbed via the S-GLUT1 transport molecule. So imagine for a moment that your digestive system is a bus station, and when you consume glucose, it sits in your gut waiting to be broken down into glucose molecules and picked up by the bus to travel to somewhere in your body. The problem is that you only have a few buses to transport all of the glucose to various locations. What happens when there's a lack of buses is a lot of the glucose sits around in the gut, not getting transported or utilized, so it just ends up raising blood sugar and doesn't get to the tissues where it's supposed to go. But here comes the secret sauce. Combining a small amount of fructose into the equation, the fructose takes a different bus, GLUT5. This means that you can almost double the amount of absorption of carbohydrates, causing a much quicker utilization to spike insulin, MTOR, and in turn, muscle growth with fewer blood sugar spikes. Sodium. While fructose goes directly to the liver and straight to work, glucose requires sodium to be adequately absorbed. By taking in half a teaspoon of high-quality salt, such as Celtic sea salt, we can heighten the absorption of carbohydrates. The common belief that salt is bad for your health is partially warranted. Heart disease is the #1 killer in the US, and we know high blood pressure, high cholesterol levels, and too much salt are all contributing factors. However, the vast majority of salt consumed comes from processed food, not from pure sea salt or pink Himalayan salt packed with minerals. It used to be that with glucose, you could digest 1 gram of carb per minute, but when we add sodium, it goes up to near 2.4 grams per minute. This means that with the additional sodium, we can take up carbohydrates faster to replace glycogen stores. Caffeine. We can also time our caffeine post-workout to get the best effects. We know that caffeine has a positive effect pre-workout by giving us energy, improving the metabolism of fat from its stored form into its usable energy burning form, and preserving glycogen, the carbohydrate that's stored inside the muscle. But post-workout, caffeine can help refuel muscles and help restore energy, replenish glycogen levels quickly, reduce muscle pain. But if you train later on in the day, be careful not to consume caffeine too close to bedtime. L-Carnitine. Studies from the Journal of Nutrition and Metabolism show a significant and natural increase in muscle protein synthesis when combining carnitine, leucine, and creatine. Pitching these 3 ingredients together triggers a remarkable process. Subjects who took part in this study didn't do any resistance training, but they saw a 2.2 pound increase in muscle mass when they took the 3 compounds together. Some could argue that the subjects increased muscle mass due to water retention from taking their creatine. The interesting fact was that these subjects had an 81% increase in power of MTOR, which made them more anabolic. We've already discussed how Lucine triggers an increase in the creation of new skeletal muscle tissue, otherwise known as protein synthesis, and the benefits of adding leucine. Now let's focus on carnitine. Carnitine increases something called the AKT signaling pathway. This pathway makes it so your body doesn't have to draw from your skeletal muscle to build new muscle. You see, you don't break down protein into amino acids from your food you eat when you're building muscle. You break it down from other areas of your body. So if you're trying to build muscle in your quads, you might break it down from muscle in your bicep. This is called ubiquitin, and when you prevent ubiquitin, you make it so that you don't have to pull and break down muscle from different areas of the body. When you think about it, you have more protein once ubiquitin stops, while the AKT pathway directly stimulates mTOR. Creatine monohydrate. We know creatine triggers more strength because it fuels creatine phosphorus system, but that's not what we're after here. We're trying to increase the cellular volume of the muscle cell. We have things called osmotic sensors that can tell when a muscle is expanding. They get triggered to grow when the muscle cell gets engorged. Now you have muscle cells being more receptive to muscle protein synthesis signaling that occurs. Now we have our super ingredients put together and we know why we're taking them. Let's put together our amounts and recommendations. So we're going to start with 1 scoop of whey isolate protein, which is roughly about 30 grams of protein, 2.5 to 5 grams of L-Leucine, 40 grams of dextrose, 2 flat tablespoons of honey or 1 medium orange, 1 cup of coffee, half a teaspoon of either Celtic sea salt or Himalayan pink salt, 2 to 4 grams of high quality omega-3s, 1 to 2 grams of carnitine, and 2.5 to 5 grams of creatine monohydrates.
For more awesome content, Like and subscribe now.